Thank you very much for the introduction, Roland. Good evening, everybody. My name is Martin Whitaker, CEO of Diurnal. I'm joined this evening by Richard Bungay, our CFO, who's here in the front row and will be around afterwards to take any questions as well. And it's really my pleasure to introduce Diurnal to you. Diurnal is a specialty pharmaceutical company which has not only developed its own pharmaceutical products, but is also on the cusp of commercialising them as well. And I'll take you through that story now. So, company snapshot, we floated on AIM in December 2015. Share price was 144p. Strong cash position at our full year results at the end of June of nearly 20 million. And what we have is some very strong long-term investors within Diurnal, well-known names in the biotechnology sector such as IP Group, Regional Investor Finance Wales, Invesco and Oceanwood. In addition to those investors, we have a very highly experienced team. Our chairman, Peter Allen, has over 20 years' experience in the pharmaceutical industry, a number of high-level and high-profile positions within pharma, and a number of successful exits. I've been working in the pharmaceutical industry for about 18 years, taking products to market. Our founder, Professor Richard Ross from the University of Sheffield, is our key opinion leader, an expert in the diseases which we're targeting. I'll talk about those in a minute. And Richard has over 20 years in financial positions in the pharmaceutical sector. So in terms of our investment overview, we're targeting multi-billion-dollar specialist endocrinology markets, both in Europe and the US. So when I say endocrinology, that means hormones. And these markets really target, in the first instance, a product that's got market potential of $500 million per annum. And it targets the hormone cortisol for patients that cannot produce it during their lifetime. We're expecting first revenues in the first half of 2018. That's less than 12 months away. So our lead product is currently under regulatory review in Europe by the European Medicines Agency. And our second product candidate is in phase 3 trials in Europe as well, and over 75% recruited into that trial. With our products, we believe we have a quick and potential route to market with low technical risks. All our products are based on very well-known active pharmaceutical ingredients with a well-known safety profile. And the formulation technologies we use are also very well precedented within the marketplace. And although in terms of our first product, we're targeting disease of cortisol deficiency, which are valued at around $500 million per annum, there are significant indication expansion opportunities beyond that first indication, which I'll talk about. We plan to commercialise our products directly in Europe and partner in the US. And the reason for that is that the way that these products are prescribed on both sides of the pond, actually, is through specialist prescribing centres. So these are large, tend to be university-type hospitals, and therefore the prescriber base is very concentrated. And therefore the opportunity that we have in Europe is with a very modest sales team, we can target these prescribing centres with our own staff. A bit more complex across the pond in the US, and we plan to partner in that territory. Our commercial exclusivity is based on 2 layers of exclusivity. Firstly, around regulatory exclusivity. The diseases that we deal with are rare or orphan diseases, and there's legislation both in Europe and the US called orphan drug legislation, which affords 10 years market exclusivity after approval in Europe and 7 years market exclusivity in the US. And we hold orphan drug designations for our diseases of interest both in the US and in Europe. And secondly, we have a Diurnal-owned patent portfolio which is beginning to grant both in Europe and in the US. And this extends exclusivity beyond the orphan drug period all the way out to 2034 for our first paediatric product called Infucorte, and 2033 for our second product, Chronocorte in adults, which I'll talk about in a minute. And because we are becoming very well known in the endocrine sector, we are actively looking at selective M&A opportunities to accelerate value generation in the medium to long term. So with those attributes, our vision is to become a world-leading specialty pharma company focused on high-value endocrinology markets. So the opportunity that we're looking at is all around the endocrine system. And these are the chemical messengers within our body that are really essential to life and responsible for a number of key bodily functions such as growth, sexual development, reproduction. When people lack a hormone, this often leads to chronic, lifelong illnesses with serious health impacts for the patients, and often the hormone needs to be replaced and needs to be replaced for life. The hormone that everyone will have heard of course, is insulin. The disease is diabetes. And over the years, very much large pharmaceutical companies have really focused in on diabetes as the key market. But actually, if you speak to endocrinologists, hormone doctors, then actually beyond diabetes, there's a multitude of diseases which have traditionally been underserved by the pharmaceutical industry, and with smaller players such as Diurnal operating in this space. And really that's where we see a key opportunity to develop our products and perhaps acquire further products in a wider endocrine setting. Being mindful of our size, we can't tackle all of these diseases all in one go. So what we're targeting is one specific hormone, cortisol, and diseases of cortisol deficiency with two products, Infucorte for pediatrics and Chronocorte for adults. And beyond that, what we have is a pipeline of internal products ranging from testosterone, a modified treatment for a T3 treatment for hyperthyroidism, a very common endocrine disease, which are coming through into the clinic right now beyond our lead products. But what I'll do, I'll focus in now on our key diseases, the first one being congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or CAH for short, and describe the progress that we've made with these. So I'll talk about congenital adrenal hyperplasia and cortisol. So cortisol is released in a very distinct rhythm about the day, which you can see here in yellow. It's very low, enabling you to get to sleep at night. It then begins to strike off from around 3 o'clock in the morning to give you a peak on waking, and then gradually decreases throughout the day. Cortisol is your energy hormone. Without cortisol on board, you will die. And if you have a very specific disease called congenital adrenal hyperplasia, it means you have an enzyme block and you cannot produce cortisol from birth. So these patients need a replacement cortisol for every day of their lives. And these patients face two key issues. One is they suffer from chronic fatigue, and adults with CAH often can't work. They have very poor healthcare outcomes and also have depression and fatigue throughout their adult lives. There is, however, a second issue that these patients face, and that is because of this enzyme block in the body, patients cannot convert the building blocks of cortisol into cortisol itself. And these building blocks or precursors are very potent molecules called androgens or sex hormones, testosterone-like molecules, which buzz around your body, causing you harm. So, for example, if you're a little girl born with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, you may have ambiguous genitalia, which may require a surgical correction. If you're a little girl or a little boy, you will often grow very quickly early on in childhood. So these children may go through puberty around the ages of 5 or 6 years of age. So they grow very quickly as young children. But actually, at the normal years when puberty kicks in, actually growth is turned off. So they actually end up being very short as adults. And complications continue into adulthood. These patients have short stature, suffer from infertility, obesity, and increased morbidity throughout their life. And ultimately, these patients will die younger than the normal population. So what clinicians try and do, they try and replace the cortisol in the body, and the way we try and do that is with a synthetic version of cortisol called hydrocortisone, probably a drug that you've all heard of, and this is taken orally in the mouth to replace or try to attempt to replace the hormone rhythm. Hydrocortisone is available in tablets and is taken typically 3 times a day, in the morning, lunchtime and tea time. At certain times of the day, the patient is overtreated with this very potent steroid molecule. You can see by the peaks here. And certain times of the day, they're undertreated. You can see by the troughs down at the bottom here as well. Taking a medicine 3 times a day, very poorly compliant treatment regimen, and hence that might be one of the reasons why these patients have such poor outcomes. However, the important point for congenital adrenal hyperplasia patients is over here, that there is no overnight coverage of cortisol. And this is essential for these patients because this is when these powerful androgen sex hormones increase overnight and really cause damage to the body. So with the current treatment regimens that are available, at best, only 1/3 of patients are adequately controlled using these treatment regimens. And this leads to what we believe is approximately 60,000 patients, both in the US and Europe, which aren't adequately treated currently. So what we've done is we've developed an adult product called Chronocorte, which is seeking to provide effective disease control for the first time for these patients. It's a capsule formulation which is taken orally, available in 5, 10 and 20 milligram doses. Each capsule contains beads of drug. You can see a cartoon here on the left-hand side of the slide. Each granule contains a microcrystalline bead, which is inert, the active layer, the hydrocortisone layer, and then around that is the innovative part of the formulation, a delayed release coat which delivers hydrocortisone to the part of the body, the GI tract, where absorption is the greatest, and therefore creating a very effective medication to replace cortisol about the day. So one thing to point out, the delayed release coat has the features that when you take it, no cortisol is released for a period of 3 to 4 hours, and then hydrocortisone begins to release thereafter. So if you take Chronocorte in a toothbrush regimen, so last thing at night, first thing in the morning, as shown by our phase 2 results here in CAH patients, carried out at the National Institutes of Health in the US, arguably one of the world leading centres for this disease. You can see the cortisol rhythm, the normal cortisol rhythm in yellow, our formulation of Chronocorte in blue, taken last thing at night, first thing in the morning, approximates the daily rhythm of cortisol. However, the way that this disease is treated in the clinic, clinicians do not measure cortisol, but actually they measure the androgens, and that's how clinicians determine how effective formulations and products are. So in this phase 2 trial in patients in the US, at the beginning of the treatment, only 31% of patients had their androgens controlled into the optimal range. And after 6 months of Chronocorte, 94% of patients had their androgens controlled into the normal range, which was a fantastic result for the company and enabled us to move into phase 3 pivotal trials in Europe. And based on that study, we were very rapidly able to get acceptance from a European Medicines Agency. We started our European trial in 110 CAH patients, and as I mentioned, over 75% recruited to date. The trial design is based on the successful phase 2 trial, which I showed in the previous slide. We've taken the product to the US. The US regulators have slightly different ways of getting the drug accepted into the US market, which has resulted in a slightly different trial design. Larger number of patients. It's taken us some time to negotiate that study design with the FDA. We're not quite there yet, and we've not started the study yet, but anticipate to start in 2018. While we were developing Chronocorte, we were speaking to clinicians worldwide and discovered that actually there was a need in not only adult patients suffering from this disease, but also paediatric patients as well, and particularly in children from birth. And to our surprise, although hydrocortisone has been around for over 60 years, and indeed has been a life-saving medication for a lot of these patients, actually there is no licensed product of hydrocortisone for this patient group, either in Europe or in the US, so a clear unmet need. And the reason for this is that no one has ever applied for this license, and what this very vulnerable young patient group that has this disease from birth takes is what you can see on the right-hand side of the slide. It's adult tablets crushed or compounded in a pharmacy, which gives highly variable results in terms of the dose that these patients take. In addition, when you crush hydrocortisone, it's intensely bitter, leads to poor compliance with the children. And at the end of the day, this is not a licensed therapy for this paediatric group. So what we did, we have a very simple solution to this unmet medical need. We have produced the first controlled dose of hydrocortisone that can be administered. Similar technology to what we've used for Chronocorte, but instead of having the delayed release layer, we have a taste masking coat around the outside of these granules, and that aids with masking the bitter taste and the compliance for these patients. You can see the product here available in flexible doses from 0.5 to 5 milligrams to enable the dose to be tailored to the child as it grows. And again, you can see the granules of the drug within each capsule. For the children do not take the capsule, but the capsule has been designed so it can be easily manipulated, opened, and the granules are tipped onto the children's tongue, so it can be taken dry. Or for children that can take food, it can be sprinkled onto foodstuffs and taken in that manner. And actually, although we started this program behind the Chronocorte program, this has been accelerated through development. And as I mentioned, we are making very good progress with our market authorization in Europe on the back of a successful phase 3 trial, which read out last year. The regulatory route we're taking is called a Pediatric Use Marketing Authorization route, or PUMA, a specialised route in Europe. And this affords us 10 years market and data exclusivity for our product post-approval. And that's really important because that's a high barrier to entry to any competitors coming in beyond us, but we will certainly be the first product to market and have first mover advantage in this area. We anticipate recommendation for approval in late 2017 and first launch and revenues in the first half of next year. So really, over the past 6 to 9 months, we've been really gearing up to supply and market Infucorte in Europe. We will do this through a contract sales team through Ashfield Health, and we now have staff on the ground in all the major European countries. Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and the UK. We have a very robust supply chain. The product is manufactured in Germany and distributed from the Netherlands, so to mitigate the issues of Brexit. With the US, the opportunity in the US is actually a lot broader than in Europe. The unmet need there is in children between 0 and 16 years of age. In Europe, it's 0 to 6. And that requires a slightly different study in the US, which again we're negotiating with the FDA and hope to start in the next few months. And again, as I mentioned, we'd like to seek a partner for commercialisation for optimal market access in the US. In terms of marketing outside of our core territories, these diseases are more or less prevalent across the globe, but actually there are 1 or 2 regional hotspots, and one is around the Eastern Mediterranean. And we've moved early to secure marketing and distribution a marketing and distribution agreement in Israel with a leading company there called Medison for specialty healthcare products. And that will come into force fully once we have market authorization in Europe. So together with Infucorte and Chronocorte, our 2 lead products, we are building a very valuable lifelong adrenal franchise to treat these patients for the first time effectively, all the way from birth all the way through to old age. And really, the next 12 months aims to be a very exciting time for the company. We anticipate European market authorization for Infucorte, our first product, with other pipeline products coming on behind. We will launch Infucorte in key European territories and generate first revenues in just under 9 months. We will commence our US programs for both products, and we aim to complete our phase 3 pivotal study for Chronocorte, our second product to treat the adult disease. And in terms of our wider pipeline, we've begun to move our pipeline into the clinic with our first pipeline product, the oral native testosterone formulation, due to read out in the middle of next year. So really, to summarise, we're building a very valuable global endocrine specialty pharma company. We're starting from a strong base in diseases of cortisol deficiency with our 2 lead products. We have a credible market access strategy for both Europe, the US, and other territories worldwide. We've got opportunities to broaden the product offering with our internal pipeline, and we have a strong team with the ability to deliver. Thank you very much.
That's terrific. Okay, do we have any questions, please? I'm sure you do, really. Gentleman here, thank you.
Could you just tell me if there are more advantages with having a classification of an orphan disease work beyond the security of the 10 years following its launch?
Well, our primary exclusivity is based around the orphan drug, which is very valuable. That no other competitor can come into that market for a period of the orphan drug exclusivity. There are 1 or 2 things that you can do to extend that by a few months towards the end of that by developing, for example, paediatric formulations. But really thereafter, our main protection and exclusivity comes from our patent portfolio, which takes us out to the early 2030s, and that gives us really 15, 16 years of market exclusivity in the pharmaceutical sector, which is a long exclusivity period.
Is there anything in terms of a faster track through approval at all?
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. I mean, when you speak to the regulatory agencies, we always say, of course, if it's an orphan drug, rare disease, we'll look at it more quickly. I think the data in reality says that it takes about a year to go through the regulatory process, and that the statistics sort of bear that out. But it's about a year whether you take a non-orphan or an orphan product through that process.
Fine, thanks.
Just add to that, sorry, that there is a financial benefit in terms of the regulatory filing fees you pay are reduced, and actually in a small, medium-sized SME company it's further reduced, so in fact it's often nil. There's a financial benefit.
How sure are you that you will produce this product at a price which might satisfy NICE?
So, I mean, pricing and reimbursement is always a hot topic in pharmaceuticals. So I think the first thing to say is that there are no other products out there in the marketplace. That nevertheless doesn't mean that we can just turn up with a product and get automatic reimbursement. We may get approval, but not reimbursement. What data NICE or other agencies in Europe look for is not necessarily the information that we have in our regulatory studies, which is sufficient for a regulator. So what we have in all our pivotal studies is we have what we call rollover studies, not very imaginatively named, but patients that complete the pivotal study roll over to the rollover study. We then collect long-term patient data on those, and that is the data that payers both in the UK and Europe wish to see to really show the clinical and long-term health benefits of these products, and those pricing discussions come after approval. So to give you an example, we've really got, we anticipate we'll have at least 2 years long-term data on the clinical benefits of these products. In addition to that, we work very closely with patients and patients groups within these rare diseases. We have created for the first time what's called a patient registry, in essence a database of patients globally that have this disease where they or their physician can register on the database. They can take part in clinical studies. They can have knowledge of when the drug becomes available. So in terms of all of these activities, we're doing as much as we can in terms of making sure we get an optimal price for our product.
Can I just ask on that, how does that price negotiation work? Do you go in like you go with a figure, they come back with a figure, or is it a more collaborative process?
The way that it works is that we or pharmaceutical companies have to demonstrate a clinical and health economic benefit to the payer, to the NHS or to payers across Europe. And the way that it works is there are a number of reference products. So, for example, one of the reference products for our drug, there's one reference product in Europe that has a price of $7,000 per patient per annum. So we are using that reference price. We believe we have a superior product. The data, we believe, will show that in due course, and we can negotiate the price based around the strength of our clinical data from that point. So we have an anchor point of $7,000 per patient per annum. That's a very good price for a drug that will be taken daily for the rest of the patient's lives. And we can try and negotiate that as far upwards as we can.
Okay. Any gentleman or lady question here? No? Gentleman at the back then, please. Thank you.
For your first product, how confident are you you'll actually get the marketing approval through? And second question is, how long do you think it will take to reach peak sales?
Yeah. So taking the first question, we can be as confident as we can be for approval. We had a very successful pivotal phase 3 study with high statistical significance showing that our product performed safely and efficaciously in our target patient group. That included neonates with the disease, so children within the first month of their life took our product and found it to be safe and efficacious. Sorry, was he?
How long do you?
And in terms of the confidence around why we think we're confident about approval is, before we entered our clinical studies, we had what was called a Paediatric Investigation Plan, or PIP, agreed with the European Medicines Agency. And again, this is a regulatory privilege for companies developing paediatric drugs, that you agree the development plan up front with a regulator, and if you stick to that plan, to the letter, then you should automatically have your drug approved. It doesn't work automatically. But as part of our submission to the EMA after our pivotal trials, we had what's called a PIP validation step, and we were fully validated and compliant with what we set out to do, with what the regulator wanted us to do, with what we did, and that's gone now through into the evaluation process, which we're hopefully coming to the end of now. We also had some further questions from the EMA over the summer, which we answered robustly. There are no major issues that were highlighted by the EMA, so we're as confident as we can be. And sorry, the second question was the?
Second question is, how long do you believe it will take to reach peak sales?
So to reach peak sales, we're looking at 4 to 5 years in terms of Europe, and that's within the industry norms.
Thank you.
I had a question on at the start of the presentation. When you're looking at the Chronocorte product, you had the US and the European markets, and at the bottom there was the size of the potential size of the market. And the figures for Europe are about 3 times greater than that in the States. That surprises me. I think the US is a bigger market for all. Why is Europe a higher value proposition?
Yeah, so I mean, traditionally people always sort of think the US is a higher value market. There's a couple of reasons for that. There appears to be a slight difference in the prevalence of the disease in Europe versus the US. Seems to be slightly more prevalent in Europe, so higher patient numbers here than in the US. And actually now when we look at the EU 28 countries, actually we're looking at 400 million people in terms of population versus approximately 300 million in the US. So again, there's a population difference there, which actually makes Europe the more valuable market.
Any other questions, please? Okay, my final one then. On the share price at the start, I think you said market cap 70...
About 70 million.
70
yeah.
With this pretty exciting year ahead of you, or 12 months ahead, or potentially very exciting, do you think, which is a bit of a devil's advocate question, how much of it is priced in already, do you think? I mean, if you're, everyone's very confident about the getting to market, first revenues, would you say at the moment you feel you're about right, or if you're looking at your share price, what would your comment be?
Well, I mean, I think you'd say it probably represents good value for anybody wanting to invest now. Certainly, if you look at the total attainable market that we have in terms of we're looking at tens of millions of dollars for Infocourt, hundreds of millions of dollars for Chronocorte. There are no real competitors in these markets, and if we can capture market share that's in line with normal pharmaceutical company expectations, 40% of the market, let's say, then I think people can do the sums and sort of work out whether that's a reasonable market cap or not.
All right, very good. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Martin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.